Harlow residents are to get their say over proposals to build up to 10,000 homes on a greenbelt site north of the town. It's not the first attempt to put a big housing project on the rural land bordering Hertfordshire, but a master plan for a string of villages called the Gilston Park Estate is almost ready for public review. Mary Parsons is from the developers. She's been speaking to BBC Essex.
Gilston Park Estate, where we're standing at the entrance to it now, it's a major development opportunity. It's an estate that places for people own. You can see we're right on the edge of Harlow, but we're also standing in East Hertfordshire. And so we're proposing to deliver a series of new places, new villages, of around about 8,500 homes. So right on the edge of Harlow, with all the convenience in terms of access, but looking out into the East Hertfordshire countryside.
How are you going to blend this necklace of villages into the local environment?
I think that's a really good question, actually, because if you look at the best places, they don't tend to be planned as one. They do tend to grow organically over time, and I think that time dimension is quite important. When we were looking at the master plan, this isn't a big sprawling housing estate with all of the houses the same. We've really started from looking at the landscape, the woodlands, the historic heritage in the area, and then looking where development might be appropriate. And within those, they will each have their own unique character.
Is it going to put any burden on Harlow and its services?
I think it's a major consideration for both Harlow and East Hertfordshire as they're going through their local plan processes to think about not only where is the right place to deliver new homes, but also how are you going to support them. And that's really what is the driver for us, because we feel strongly that actually if you can plan for growth, if you can focus this in one place, then actually you are delivering the schools, you are bringing the investment in the roads, and you're not just putting the houses in and waiting for it to happen. So, it was obviously a major consideration when we've talked to local people in both Harlow and in the villages. What's going to happen about schools? There's a real shortage in the area. There's congestion on the roads. And what we're saying is, well, actually, there are solutions to those. There's investment that this development could bring. We're standing here by the roads. We can see the volume of traffic. It's making sure that we actually plan for new access in and out of Harlow and invest in the road infrastructure. Major investment in secondary education. It would be potentially 6 new primary schools, 2 new secondary schools, and investment into health and leisure and so on as well. So we really are trying to make sure that these new communities and the existing ones here would have everything that they need to support them.
That's the developer Mary Parsons, or a spokesperson for the developers, speaking to BBC Essex reporter Rosanna Lockwood. Joining me now is Labour Councillor Tony Durcan. He's Harlow Council's Cabinet Member for Resources and Enterprise. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
The idea of 10,000 homes being built on your doorstep, do you support that?
Well, Harlow Council have always had an ambition to have Harlow extended to meet the housing needs. And certainly Harlow North has always been the most attractive option available to us. But as the former speaker was saying, it's not just about dropping in houses, it's actually looking at the infrastructure and how that can actually blend in not only to the current existing community but the wider community of Harlow. So I was reassured with some of the comments were being made about schools infrastructure, but we also have to look at all the main services, including the hospital, because we just don't want to add on something that isn't attractive and isn't actually helpful for the wider picture of Harlow.
So, Tony, what would be on your wish list? Because developers are developers. They develop and they want to build as many houses as they can, and quite honestly, for giving as little as they can, because that's what developers do. That's their business. But equally, from a councillor's point of view, you want as much out of them as you can get. So what's on that shopping list?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's be honest, the developers are capitalists. I'm a socialist, and actually what I want is the very, very best for my community. At the end of the day, we do have a struggle. We do need more affordable houses in this area. With the enterprise zone that is being developed in Harlow, we're going to be creating 5,000 new jobs. People need to live in decent homes, in decent communities. So therefore, we do have to work with our colleagues from the developers even though that their objective is about profit, to actually ensure that anything that is designed and developed is suitable and sustainable for the whole community. What we don't want is a developer coming in, building, taking money, going away. We want something that is a legacy for the whole of Harlow, and if that includes Harlow North, then we'll get into dialogue and we'll get into discussion. So we're not worried and we're not scared. We actually do welcome this opportunity, but it has to be the right opportunity for the whole of Harlow.
But apart from having a conversation, you've got to stand up and get tough here, haven't you, Tony? Because, you're summed up by Alison, who got in touch earlier, saying, well, how many of those properties are going to be starter homes as compared to 5-bedroom detached houses with 3 bathrooms?
Absolutely, no, and absolutely, I can absolutely assure that person that Harlow is absolutely determined, because this isn't actually in Harlow land, this is in Hertfordshire. So one of the other things that we would have to be talking to, and I know it's a very sensitive issue for our colleagues in East Hertfordshire, is actually what is the implications, what are the impacts and effects of this particular issue. We will be arguing that 35% of all properties should be affordable social housing. We would also be expecting a proportion of that to be coming from the Harlow waiting lists. And at the same time, what we don't want to be doing is just building new houses without the appropriate infrastructure. We have to look at the hospital, we have to look at the community services, GPs, schools and other things. So this is not just about a developer coming in, tearing up green fields, building houses, taking their profits and running away. Harlow will stand strong and will stand tall, for it's got to be right for the whole of Harlow.
OK, Labour Councillor Tony Durcan, Harlow Council's Cabinet Member for Resources and Enterprise, talking about the possibility of 10,000 new homes to be built just north of Harlow. Kevin Fitzgerald is from the Campaign to Protect Rural England group and joins BBC Essex now. Morning to you.
Good morning.
It's going to happen. We need the houses, they say.
It's not necessarily going to happen. We do need the houses. There are other ways of dealing with this. I mean, Harlow in particular, where I used to work for many years, has got quite a lot of space within the town itself without the need to go out there and take up the countryside. I mean, the arguments you heard in the market, it's very interesting, because we're always accused of being people who live in the country and wanting to protect it, but it's the people who live in the towns that benefit quite a lot from having beautiful countryside on their doorstep, readily accessible, they can walk through and enjoy. And it's not necessary in this case to destroy it in this way.
Trouble is, though, Kevin, if you fill in those gaps in Harlow, and there are plenty of green gaps there, then all you've got is wall-to-wall concrete. You have no green gaps that make Harlow, or made Harlow, special when people move to the area.
You don't have to have wall-to-wall concrete. You have a town, and actually, I mean, in effect, a garden city sort of thing. You can plan in your
building on the garden then, aren't you, if you fill in the gaps in Harlow?
Well, you don't have to fill them all in. I mean, you plan for green spaces, green lines, green infrastructure. That's part of planning these days. I mean, the point about the countryside is, of the new planning system, is the government's quite specifically said they will protect the green belt, and they do understand the value of the countryside on the doorstep of these towns. And it is a massive development. It's like a small new town. It's not even a proper extension of Harlow, because you have to go across the main road, the river and the railway and go out. It's virtually plonking a development in the countryside. And of course it's going to swallow up some of our villages and completely change the character of the area.
But in the relationship to Harlow, a string of villages around the edge, then where else would they go? I mean, we're talking, I guess, about High Wyche here and Eastwick, but do you expand Stansted Abbott so that comes out to meet Harlow? Do you take Harlow to meet Stansted Abbott? If this number of houses have got to be built, they're going to have a big impression on the countryside, aren't they?
Well, the number of houses hasn't been decided by East Herts yet. East Herts are still in the process of producing their big district plan. It'll be coming out later in the year when they finalise the actual numbers of houses that they think they need in the district. And this is quite a big district as well, because it doesn't mean necessarily north of Harlow. So it's a bit premature at the moment to start talking of these huge numbers on that piece of countryside before there's a district plan in place.
But huge numbers nonetheless between Harlow and East Hertfordshire, so they're going to go somewhere, and if not north of Harlow, then somewhere else we'll be looking at this potential.
They will be looking at houses in the whole of the district, as everybody else is throughout the country, of course, at this moment. But it doesn't mean to say you have to have that number in that place. I mean, it was mentioned earlier in your piece, but, put these in the right areas. And there are other towns in East Herts which would expand, of course, to take up the numbers that they would eventually come up with, because they haven't actually concluded yet how many houses they need in the district.
But equally, if you expand, as you're suggesting, in East Herts, then that's going to involve West Essex as well. So do we increase, double the size perhaps of Sawbridgeworth on the border? Do we go to Hatfield Heath and build on the Heath almost? I mean, where does this number of houses go? And I take the point that you're saying that final figures haven't come into consideration yet, but if we're talking 16,000, 17,000, it's not going to be considerably less, is it?
It's going to be probably about that. We don't really know yet, of course. As I say, it is quite early on. I mean, you have to take account of things like the last census, which hasn't been brought into account yet, because, in fact, in some parts, the numbers are going down. But, yes, it is a big area, and this is what planning is all about. This is why the District Council is producing a long-term plan. The idea that a developer comes along and says, right, the way we're going to solve your problem is by building all these houses in this place. We know it's wrong. We know it's on the green belt. The government has said in its planning system, we will protect the green belt. The government has said we will protect open countryside where possible. They've even acknowledged in the new planning system, which is designed to produce more houses, that this is not the sort of place where you put this sort of development.
OK, thank you. Kevin Fitzgerald from the Campaign to Protect Rural England.